It is good to be here this morning and to share here with my wife Liz, and then three of our four, Matthias, Morgan, and Madeline. And they sat in age-appropriate order. So missing is our oldest, Micah. He's working at a Christian camp in Michigan, and next week gets married, so out in Pennsylvania. So that's where he's at. He's doing his own thing now. It's good to be back. 5 years. We were in Chile 5 years ago, and we were talking about the possibility of wrapping up our time in our ministry in Chile and what the Lord had for us. We expected maybe another 4 or 5 years of ministry in Chile to wrap up and leave the ministry in national hands. And the Lord sped that up. And we found ourselves 2 years into it. The Lord provided someone to come alongside and take the directorship of the camp and another family to accompany him. And we made the move over to Uruguay. And that was in the wonderful COVID years with many different visa requirements and things. And we've been 2.5 years now in Uruguay, getting to know a new culture, getting adapted to a new climate, if that's possible. We went from a very much Pacific Northwest kind of a feel, weather in Chile, to a not very Pacific Northwest feel. When we left Uruguay in March, which is tail end of summer, we left with 117 degrees and 85% humidity. And got to Florida, it was 90, and it felt really nice. So there's been some adjusting to do with that. Language is Spanish, just like it was in Chile, but with different nuance, different vocab, different accents, and a culture that's unknown to us. And we want to share a little bit about Uruguay, just to kind of get you up to speed. It's one of those small South American countries that, other than their soccer team, those that follow that, it's really the only thing that's known about it. And we use abbreviation to kind of just do a mental picture of the ministry and where we're at. URY, and the U stands for the unreached. And this is the country of Uruguay. If you could sum up the country, it's an unreached country. It's not Roman Catholic like the majority of South America. They kicked out religion about 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, and did kind of a cultural whitewashing of anything religious from the government down. Renamed cities, changed holidays that were religious, and basically just kicked out God from public life. And it's had a trickle-down effect to the point where the country is pretty much atheistic as a whole. Very small percentage would be believers, and a few little cults scattered here and there, but pretty much a country that just lives for today. A country that lives for enjoying life. Since there is no God and there's nothing after this, you're forced to just live for the today and what you can enjoy in this life. And they're very content people, and they're content as long as they have a few basic things, unlike maybe our culture that needs a bunch of things and more things and bigger things and faster things. The Uruguayan culture for years has been content with basics. And the first one is mate. And it's a South American tea that's, the grounds go in the gourd, and the metal straw has a filter on it. You pour the hot water through it. It's not as addictive as coffee, they say, and yet everyone walks around with it all day long. The thermos goes tucked under the arm and the gourd, and you ride your motorbike with it, you drive with it, you go to the bank with it, you go to the grocery store with it. On your downtime, which is a lot of Uruguayan time because they're very laid back, you sit there and drink it. And it's a social thing. You pass it around, yes, the same straw. No, there's no disinfecting between uses. It's a communal cup, and it's shared this way. And if they have that, they're happy. The second thing that dominates their heart and their passion is soccer, like I mentioned earlier. And this goes beyond patriotism or nationalistic spirit. They're not very patriotic about their country until their team is chasing the soccer ball down the field. And then everyone is Uruguayan to their very core. But other than that, not a whole lot of flags around other than game day. And as long as they have soccer to watch, and it's not just their team, this is, every little neighborhood has one or two teams that they play each other. Every city has several teams that play against each other. Every small town has a team. And there's soccer fields all over the place, and they're always playing. And as long as they have that and their tea, they're happy. You don't need a whole lot. And the third thing that you could sum up is not their love for the animals, but the byproduct of their love for having a good piece of meat on the grill. There are more cows in Uruguay than people, and the byproduct of that is obviously if you have meat to grill, if you have tea and soccer to watch, what else do you need in life? And it's very simple. It's considered South America's happiest country because with very few things they are content. But this contentment is outward. It's not truly satisfying to their soul. It's not filling for their life in a sense of purpose. And it makes it very difficult when you approach them with the gospel and share of their need for a Savior. Why would I need anything else if I have my basic needs met, which are these few things? Why would I need salvation, apart from the fact that, of course, the premise is there is no God, there is nothing after this. So how do you minister to a people like this, and how does the gospel go out? Well, I think you have to start with the premise of the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. And the gospel breaks through all those fictitious happiness and joy that man tries to put, that contentment that he tries to fill his heart with. And we have a young man, I say young because he's in his 30s, so he's young, in our church. And we like using him as an example of what the Lord does through the gospel and the power of the gospel to not only reach one, but also more. The guy in the middle, Ricky, in the red shirt, was living the Uruguayan dream. He had talent in soccer. He'd made it to the professional level. He was in the process of being trained up for their national team, which is a big deal. And with that fame and fortune comes also many temptations. And he got into drugs and very quickly ruined his career and ruined his life and ended up in a very low place where everything worth living for was taken away from him. And heard the gospel broke through. He was saved out of that, and the Lord restored his purpose and meaning in life beyond anything he'd ever had before. And had the privilege, when we got to Uruguay, being involved in the church, to baptize him. And he had felt that need to be obedient and declare publicly his faith in Christ. And not only in the waters of baptism, but also afterwards, he developed a great burden for sharing with others, Uruguayans, that had not heard the gospel, and looked for different ways of ministering to them. Came up with an idea of setting up and handing out free hot water. Like normally you think, okay, you want cold water, especially if it's hot, but the Uruguayans need to refill their thermoses every so often. And they set up a little table offering free hot water for those that needed hot water for their thermos and their mate. And through that, obviously had opportunities to share the gospel. Why would you be handing out free hot water? Everyone else sells hot water to fill your thermoses. And they had gospel tracts. They would talk to people, pray with people as they would stroll on by. And saw the need and set out to witness to the community. But not just the community. Enrique felt the need also to minister to his family. The man on the lower right, I still haven't figured that out. I'm like all backwards from where the pictures are, is his brother, Darius. And none of Ricky's family is saved. They're all unbelievers, hostile, indifferent to the gospel in this way. And Ricky started inviting his brother to men's meetings that we would have. His brother started coming because there was food. So obviously men are attracted to food, especially when it's good food. And Dario started coming. And these men's meetings are outreach opportunities. We preach the gospel. and have a good group of men. He heard the gospel, not just once, but repeatedly as he started coming to it. He started coming to church on a regular basis to hear. And about a year after he started coming, the gospel broke through his heart, and he transformed. One of those cases where you say, well, the gospel doesn't change us outwardly, and yet there was something different physically about his expression, his face, his interaction with other people when the gospel broke through that hard heart. And he also followed the Lord in believer's baptism, was obedient to that. And one of the things he shared in talking about how do you reach an indifferent culture, an indifferent country, Dario shared in his testimony before he was baptized of how his family had seen the transformation in Ricky's life. They'd seen where he'd gotten to in life, what drugs had done, what his lifestyle had done, and the complete turnaround that the gospel had produced. And Dario said, there's no question something had happened in him. And after he observed that and watched that, he said, and I knew I needed that also. And we had the joy and the privilege of seeing him baptized. And now Dario also carries on with the burden to see his family saved. On my side here, far edge, is his wife and young son. And he's got a burden for them. They are unsaved. And she's come to church every so often, but is kind of indifferent. And we continue to pray for her and him as he leads his home and wants to see them saved. And that's how the gospel breaks through. It's God's power. It works in places that seem impossible and hopeless. And through the testimony, not just of word, but of changed lives, the gospel is adorned and goes forth. The second thing, the R, revitalization. This is kind of our ministry part in 2.5 years in Uruguay, what the Lord has done through us. We're often referred to as camp missionaries, and it's been a big part of our ministry throughout the years. We've lived on camp in Chile and worked there for almost 14 years. And the goal in going to Uruguay was to do the same thing, was to take a camp ministry that had been abandoned for many years. It was not being productive. It was disorganized. And take every aspect from the facility to the program to the ministry side of things and try to revitalize it. And we're talking like life support revitalization here. It wasn't just hobbling along. It was dead in the water, and the need to pick it up. And there's different aspects of that, the revitalization. There's the obvious physical needs that the camp may have. There's construction always, any place, especially a camp ministry, has buildings. They look great until you actually get closer and get to meet them face to face. There were many physical needs that continue to overwhelm us even 2.5 years later. And we've been chipping away at trying to renovate the facility itself, constantly fighting different elements that we were unused to, like flooding, like ants. And we're not talking the little sugar ants, we're talking every other kind of ant imaginable. Many species, subspecies, some big ones, some very invasive ones. And it's been a learning curve for us. I've never sprayed so much bug spray in my whole life as we have in 2.5 years. They're trying to at least keep the ants on their side of the line. We're not getting rid of them, but at least we're keeping them in the walls and in the ceiling instead of in the cabin with the campers. The Lord has provided funds for different projects. We were able to redo the pool last year, which was very needed in a hot climate. If you don't have a pool, you don't have campers show up. So the Lord provided funds to be able to redo it. We went through a process of taking the lime scale off because it had been 20 years of lime scale buildup in the pool. We had to chip all that off, burn it off, grind it off, many different processes to get that off. And finally, we were able to repaint it and put a filter and a pump system on it, because before that, it was just filled every week. It would sit there and stew for a week with 110-degree weather and a pile of campers. My wife calls it chicken noodle soup. And you would empty it at the end of the week, power wash it, and refill it for the next week. And now we have filter on it. We keep it, up to standards, so it looks like that the whole week instead of turning into the other. And they're just different things that the Lord has allowed us to do in our time. All of that with the focus and the emphasis of being able to serve people and see young people, see families, see children come to the camp, hear the gospel, and be saved, and also be edified through the preaching of the word. And the Lord has allowed us to run different activities for teens and for families in the time we've been there. Uruguay being a small country, being very atheistic, there's very few churches, and they're very small churches. So you don't have a huge pool to draw from. And so we continue to minister to those that he does bring. And we've had great opportunities for evangelism. It's a great attraction for young people, even if they're unchurched, because it's the opportunity to get out of the city and go someplace, have some fun, with our purpose being sharing the gospel. We also have the opportunity to minister to secular groups through the camp ministry. And we've had different sports groups, school groups come. The condition we have is we get to share what this place is all about. And of course, what the place is all about is the gospel. So with all the groups that come in that are secular groups, they sit down and we get to share the gospel. Here's one group. It was a professional soccer team. They were doing their spring training on camp. They were lodging there, doing the technical part, their studies, and then they would go into town to the stadium to do their physical part of training. And actually had Ricky, who had been a professional soccer player, come out and share his testimony with these young men and share the gospel with them. And he was able to connect way beyond what I could have, just because of the background. He was able to tell them, you think this is where happiness is, you think this is what's going to fulfill you. And he said, without Christ, he said, this is meaningless, and was able to share the gospel with them. We also have school groups that come out. Private schools, public schools can't come because they don't allow us to share the gospel. And but private schools come out. They bring their kids, sometimes very young, to actually spend the night. It's like one of their school experiences to spend a night on camp. And we have the opportunity to sit them down and share the gospel with them. And one of the first instances of sharing the gospel with these kids where we realized we're not in Chile anymore was this little girl in the pink jacket. I finished talking about God's word and how it's a light unto our path, and talking about how it shows us what God wants from us for life, and went through, did my whole thing. I even had a flashlight, to back up the object lesson. And at the end of it, she raised her hand and said, "What's a Bible?" She'd never heard of a Bible, not the contents of the Bible, just never even heard the word Bible before, and had the opportunity to share what the Bible was. And we see much of this darkness or spiritual ignorance on the part of the Uruguayan people. And the Lord has allowed the camp ministry to be just part of the tool to share the gospel and reach out to the Uruguayan people. The second part of revitalization that the Lord placed in our laps when we got there was the church ministry. It was not what we intended. It was not what we planned. When we got to Uruguay, we were going to be members of this church. We were going to be involved in the church and support it. And quickly realized, well, we knew they didn't have a pastor, but quickly realized the church was hurting. It was in a bad way. And within about 2.5 months, they asked if I would be willing to pastor the church. And I told the Lord before we went that I wouldn't do it because we wanted to focus on the camp ministry. And the Lord spoke to us and kind of said, well, if the buildings don't get fixed up quite yet, what does it matter if the church is without leadership and if the church is hurting? And 2 years now, the Lord has had us there in the church, providing leadership, preaching, teaching, working with different people, different aspects of discipleship, sometimes 4 or 5 times a week in preaching and teaching, depending on the different activities. And Liz also with women's Sunday school class and women's meetings that are outreach opportunities also. And it's taken up a lot of our time. And that's what I was saying. We're camp missionaries, but for the last 2 years, probably about 80% of our time has been dedicated to the church and trying to stabilize and just kind of get it back into a place where they could call their own pastor. There's no pastors available in Uruguay. Many churches without pastors. It's a major need that we see, and praying that the Lord would use us as part of the solution long term to see young men dedicated and trained up for the pastorate ministry. Part of that is in the yet to come. And the why for the yet to come is what we feel the Lord leading us to do in the months ahead and the different activities and things in our life. Furlough travels. Today's our last furlough meeting, technically. So I guess we're done with furlough travels today. And we've had opportunity of sharing with our churches and our supporters in the last few months what the Lord is doing. And coming up next is in a week, or starting tomorrow, I guess, we travel out to Pennsylvania for Micah's wedding. After that, end of mid-August, we drop Morgan off at Bible school. And Matthias is in his second year there, or he'll be in his third year of Bible, sorry. He finished his second year, will be in his third year Bible school there at Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia. And it means we drop Morgan off. It means we go back to Uruguay with just one, Maddie. She's the last melon there that is traveling with us back to Uruguay. And she's, if you can remember to pray for her, she's taking on the weight of all previous siblings that have left. And so all the work they did, she's going to have to do now. And we're just trying to encourage her that she can do it. It does mean a changing family dynamic for us, just like even moving to Uruguay changed our family dynamic a lot. And just ask for your prayers for that transition back to Uruguay with the different shift in the family. Pray for the church in Paysandú. We go back with the goal of getting men who have been teaching and preaching in our absence set up for leadership and elected into leadership positions. The church has not had more than 2 men up to now in leadership. The church is about 70 people. And yet there's a good group of men that need to step up, step in, and be trained up for leadership with the goal of the church having a healthy leadership to be able to call a full-time pastor to serve them. We're a Band-Aid to their problem and want to be a help, but they do need a full-time pastor. Pray with us that the Lord would provide a full-time pastor. There is a possibility that a young man's been contacted. He's Uruguayan, but is living in Chile right now and ministering in Chile. And February, he's going to come visit and see about the possibility of hopping back across the Andes Mountains, back to his own country, and serving the Lord there. So pray with us for this possibility. It means we probably still have at least a year of working with the church before this could happen, but we trust the Lord in his time to work through that. When we get back, also the yet to come part is we have to start building a camp staff house. There's one on camp, and we're going to need another. And the reason for that is the 2026 Bible training program on camp. One of the needs that we mentioned is the lack of pastors, the lack of leaders in Uruguay. And the Lord has burdened our heart and the heart of the Espinel family with seeing on-campus Bible training center on camp and using the facilities we have for year-round use, both for camp and for a Bible training place, where young people not only come to get Christian education, theological education, but also learn practical skills. In other words, they'll be my maintenance workers, and discipline, and also opportunities to minister on weekends in different church plant settings and different church settings in the area. To do that, we have to build a house in a few months so that this other family can move on, and it gives us time to then get temporary housing facilities on camp. We're going to have a campus type situation, not use the camp cabins, so that we can continue to offer that to other groups and run our own activities. And there's a lot of work in the next year to be able to get this operational. So camp-wise, it's kind of our focus for the next year. We continue to minister to the young people with weekend retreats every other month, and we'll continue to run camps, but our focus is going to be getting this program up and running. We need young people who see the need for giving their lives to the Lord full-time, serving Him and going into ministry. It's not popular here. It's less popular down there. Many Christian parents that we have seen in the short time dissuading their young people to serve the Lord. It's not a profitable career. It's not going to get you comfort and money. Many would say it's not even a valid job option or future option, and they dissuade their young people that might be interested in getting further training and going into ministry. So we're praying that the Lord would use this as an opportunity to see young people dedicate their lives, come, serve. We were able to see it in Chile in a short way. We saw campers come through in Chile and come back as staff to serve other campers and feel the Lord leading them to ministry, went on to Bible school in Chile to study, and they're pastors now in Chile, serving full-time. And we're praying that the Lord would do the same thing in Uruguay, that He would allow us to see that process fulfilled. And some of the needs for pastors in Uruguay met, and why not just continue going beyond what is Uruguay, but think of Argentina, bordering country. We're right on the border with Argentina. Not secular, very Catholic, and also very dark spiritually. Very, very few gospel witnesses in Argentina. As you drive through huge tracts of country that don't have gospel witness, large towns. I was just reading this morning on the church's website. So Port Angeles is what, like 20,000-ish? And you drive through sections of Argentina with towns of 20,000, and there's no gospel witness, not a church, nothing. And we're praying that the Lord would use even Uruguayans to be burdened to go to Argentina and also church plant. So quickly summarized what the Lord has done and what we feel the Lord is leading us to do down the road in our ministry. We're thankful for your part in the ministry the Lord has called us to, first in Chile and now in Uruguay. Your prayers, your support allow us to be down there serving Him, and what the Lord has done is counted to your credit also for that support. So thank you. I think we have time, if it's okay. What time do we go till? Okay, so we got a few minutes. If you would have questions, I go through my spiel real quick, and I don't know if it all ties together, if there's holes in what I'm saying. If you have questions, but if you have questions, I'd love to answer those questions, or for my wife, or for the kids. I always throw them under the bus at this point, so yes.
With this in the last, did you say the century that they've squashed the
Mm-hmm.
side, is there any pressure now to where you're at and what you're doing, the government kind of watching you? Or
No.
has it just kind of died and it's just...
There's no hostility toward religion. It's just, it's not included in any way, shape, or form within government, education, or anything. We have complete freedom to preach. We could go to a street corner, we could go to a park and set up a booth and preach. No hindrance whatsoever. No animosity, just, I would say, indifference. It's not needed. And you kind of look at what would be a communistic mindset of religion, where it's just a crutch. And that's kind of the underlying, the undercurrent to how they view religion in general, especially the older generations that would have been communistically indoctrinated. It was just, religion was like, who needs that? It's just a crutch. It's just for the weak people. Life is all about now. Uruguay, within that older population, has one of the highest suicide rates in South America because of that mindset. You've lived your best part of your life. It's behind you. If life is for enjoyment, then you're at the point in life where it's not as enjoyable as it used to be, and a very high suicide rate. Happiest country in South America, highest suicide rate. You say something's going wrong there, and that's the truth. The newer generations, I would say, have looked at what happens when you take God out of the equation or spirituality. And the newer generations, I would say, are open to talk about the possibility of something bigger than us, something after this. Typically, it looks a little bit more New Agey, like, we're all part of this and we continue to exist afterwards. But there's an openness to at least interact with the possibility that there's more to life than what we can see, and that there's probably something that continues after this. And I think part of that is obviously the desire of some kind of a hope, or that they would have deep in them, looking everywhere for it, and settling on many wrong answers looking for it. But there is an openness, at least, to talk about it now, that the older generations would have just shut the door on. Way in the back.
Any hostile groups against you guys?
Not that we've encountered. What would you say? No. There are a lot of other cults in Uruguay that have been there for years. You see quite a few Mormons walking around, and other groups. The South American prosperity gospel has swept in, especially in what would be like the lower, humbler neighborhoods in Uruguay, offering riches and prosperity, and has gained some following. There's no gospel in it at all, so we don't view them as brothers in Christ or participating in the ministry we're doing, because they're selling something very different. But there's no pushback that we've seen of any kind. The only pushback, some say, when you go to do paperwork that's church related or religious related, it just might take longer to do. But probably not as bad as the rest of South America that's Catholic. There your paperwork just goes missing. So it doesn't just take longer, it just doesn't happen. But
was there a Christian influence before this purge, and what kind of triggered or initiated the purge?
So Uruguay has no native population. Everyone in Uruguay is an import from somewhere else. Primarily Spanish, Italian, quite a bit Russian, German, Ukrainian. Everyone is from somewhere else. Whatever native population was there was wiped out. It was a migratory population. So everyone there, actually blonde hair and blue eyes is not uncommon to see, which is very different than what Chile was. But they would have brought some of their religion, mostly Catholicism. You still see a few cathedrals, basilicas around. But what led that kicking out of religion was probably Marxism coming from Europe, with those, German, Ukrainian, Russian, kind of that whole movement from that century came with them, and they just purged what it was. So it's very odd. You could be in Europe in the feel of how people think, but in a Uruguayan laid-back context. So, yeah.
Is the government more of a socialistic system?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Cost of living is high. Taxes are through the roof. It's one of South America's most expensive countries because of it. We croaked when we got out to Washington. We road tripped all around the U.S. to get out here, and it's like, when it got up to $3 a gallon for gas, we were going, oh man, that's expensive. And then we hit Washington, we're like, that's ridiculous. But then we remembered that in Uruguay, we're paying almost $9 a gallon, and that's just taxes. And then we're like, okay, we'll just remember that. So Washington's not so bad. Very socialistic, many welfare programs. Everyone's entitled to everything: education, healthcare. If they ever get to you, if you don't die first, which they hope you do, so they don't have to do anything for you. And we joke about it, but it's true. We've had cases in our church that the doctors will just lie to you till you die, so they don't have to do anything. So it's socialistic. It's a democratic government. It's very stable, but socialistic in spending and taxes and economy-wise.
So Dan, where did you guys, or where did the camp come from? And are you, what is funding the camp?
So the camp was there. It's part of the Fellowship of Churches, the same one that we worked with in Chile. They started it, the mission, yeah. They started it 25 years ago-ish, and had different people kind of working off and on at it, had highs and lows, and then really in the last 6-7 years was pretty much abandoned. There was no one working with it full-time. The facility suffered. COVID killed off whatever last ministry was to be had, because they had to cancel 2 years, 3 years of ministry. And so it was there. We we arrived, and it was in the red. There was no finances, no funding, and the Lord has provided through just the use of it to be able to get the camp to pay for its own expenses and bills. And then the Lord has provided funding from outside, from the U.S., to help cover different projects for improving and renovating it. So that's how it's running. The running operational part is covered by the groups that come, and anything beyond that is the Lord providing through churches in the U.S. or Canada or different places. How do you explain what shape it was in? Nothing worked. Everything was broke down. The camp has a little Kubota tractor, and we opened the shop up when we get there, and it was in buckets all over the place. And we kind of knew it was in rough shape. We'd taken a little shop manual along in Japanese, and had pictures though, so we were able to put the tractor back together. But everything that was on camp was broken. I'd go out to do a little job that required the chop saw, and the chop saw was broken. To cut the wood, to do the project, and everything was like that in a domino effect. The water heaters for the bathroom, oh yeah, they worked last time we used them. And we got to looking at them, and they were completely rusted out. There was nothing left. I'm like, the last time was 4 years ago, and they worked, and they were not maintained, they were not cared for, and they just rotted. And everything has been like that all along the way. Much of the construction was done a la Uruguayan, and it means that it's all masonry, and it's done not quite to code or standard of any kind. So you have walls that are cracking, buildings that are still there, but as it rains and as it dries out, the walls crack and then contract, and it dries out and they crack again, and you try to patch it and they just keep cracking because there's no footings and there's no rebar and there's no any of that kind of stuff. So everything has been uphill construction-wise and facility-wise since we got there. And we were doing pretty good, and then we got 2 once-in-a-lifetime windstorms. I'm not sure how that works. Like, it's supposed to be 1. We got 2 within a year. Blew parts of roof off, part of the roof off our house while we were in it, and that was pretty exciting. It was like a little mini twister. Sounded like a jet engine, and then just peeled a tin right off the roof. And there's nothing else after the roof. It's just tin roof and a little drop ceiling thing that they put in, that they held down with bricks so it wouldn't float away. And those bricks then decided to come on through when the wind picked the roof off. So very exciting times, and lots to do facility-wise just for years to come in the ministry. Got a couple more minutes. Any other questions? We are thankful for you. We're thankful for the church. We have prayer cards, yes. So out on the table out there, we have prayer cards to take, to put them wherever you put them. Remember to pray for the ministry, pray for the family. We got plenty printed. If you want to take a couple, take a couple. If you want one for your dartboard, if you want one for your fridge, whatever else you do with them, go ahead and take them. We also have stickers out there for those that are into stickers on water bottles or mugs or laptops or whatever else you put them on. We have stickers. They even can go on the car too. They're pretty tough. And those stickers are from our camp ministry. So if you take those, they're free to take. Please take them. But when you see that, remember also to pray for the camp ministry in Uruguay. Remember to pray for our family. So Yeah,
How do you support them then?
good. I think we're 90%-ish, which is better than we've ever had. When we got to Uruguay, it took a tumble because of COVID-related stuff in our churches, and the Lord has brought in other churches and supporters and brought us back up. So we're set to continue ministering and go back, and so we have projects coming up, and those we're trusting the Lord to provide. He always did in Chile just enough for the next project, and we're praying the Lord provide for the house. We have 20% maybe of what we need. No? 10? I'm being optimistic. And we're going back. We have enough to start. We're going to start and trust the Lord to bring in the rest for the house to see that done. Yeah, work teams. We are looking for help in the framing process, in the slab pour process. I hear some of you have experience, like current experience on these things. We are looking for it. There's not a whole lot of time. It's not planned very far ahead. We're looking for teams in October, maybe 2 teams to come down and help different phases of the framing and roughing in of the house. We have a team from Canada scheduled for November. They would come and help kind of with a lot of the finished part of the house. Our goal is by end of December, January to be moved into the house. It doesn't have to be done. It needs to be closed in at least, right? Working bathroom, kitchen. That's kind of our goal, so that this other family, the Espinels, can move into the other house that's on camp by January, and then we can continue to work on preparations for the Bible Institute. So we are looking. We're going to throw out some dates. We're going to be coordinating, for those of you who know Greg Thompson, coordinating through him to put together teams. We're not looking for big teams. We're just looking for teams with 6, 7 guys that know what they're doing, and kind of 2 weeks beginning of October, 2 weeks end of October, and see how much we can get done through that. So he'll have the information. If you're interested in that, you can contact him. And as far as cost, as far as what it would look like, and time frames and stuff like that. And I know I mentioned it gets really hot there, but October's still okay. It's probably only in the 80s, so that's fine. It's still springtime. No need to worry about 110 at that point. So thank you.